this is an initiative that falls within the commemoration of a special anniversary, an anniversary of special significance, the 27th of January. On the 27th of January, the Allied soldiers arrived at the gates of Auschwitz concentration camp. The 27th of January has been made a day to commemorate the liberation of Nazi concentration camps, symbol of the Holocaust that epitomizes the horror and cruelty inflicted by man to man. But by remembering the Holocaust, it's worth remembering some other things, and the most important is that the Holocaust did not come all of a sudden. It came as the climax of a long, disgraceful history of anti-Semitic persecution, pogroms, and institutionalized discrimination. The brutal extermination of people began not with tanks or guns, but with words, systematically portraying the Jews as the others, the different, the less legitimate. This was the prelude to the horrors that followed. And this is a lesson as crucial today. And I would like to give the floor to Dr. Cohen. Mimi Cohen was born in Athens, Greece, where he finished school and studied medicine. He became an assistant professor at the University of Athens, and he worked under Professor Tundes. He came to the US in 1978 and specialized in plastic surgery. He lives and works in Chicago. His work on the Jews in Greece is a lifelong interest, the product of extensive and scholarly research. He's one of the first board members of the American Friends of the Jewish Museum in Greece, which is in Athens. Today, he will tell us the story of the Jews in Greece, an aspect of our history, an aspect of Greek history, which it is time, and I'm sure we all want to find out more about. Ladies and gentlemen, Mr. Cohen.
Thank you, Arab Buras, Your Grace Demetrius, Mr. Solomon Asser, friends and guests. When I first came to Chicago 28 years ago, people would say, Mimis Cohen from Greece. What was your Greek name? Was it Kohenakis, Kohenopoulos? And I'll never forget a prominent Greek-American professor in Chicago of surgery who, as soon as he heard who I was and where I was coming from, he crossed himself and said, Mimis Cohen, a Jew from Greece, Kyrie eleison. And yet, the story of Greek Jews is a very long one, over 25 centuries. The Jews have been in Greece more than in any other country in Europe. The first Jewish communities in Europe were established in Greece. To the best of our historic knowledge, 24 centuries ago, but we know that there were communications even way before that. And maybe you don't know, and you have never heard, that the Greeks are mentioned in the book of Genesis as one of the people that are the descendants of Noah. And they are called Yavan, they are still called Yavan, from Ion. Ionia was the coastal part of, which is now Turkey, which was fully Greek habitated at the time. But the true connection between the Greeks and the Jews started with Alexander the Great. Alexander, we really don't know that he visited Jerusalem because at the time Jerusalem had no strategic importance for him. But the rumors are, and the traditions are, that Alexander, in his way to conquer the Persian Empire, he visited Jerusalem in the year 3034. According to Josephus, Flavius Josephus was a historian, a Jewish historian of the 1st century. The high priest Jadus walks towards Alexander, and in order to greet him, but also prevent him from destroying the city. The tradition says that Alexander recognized in him, he was walking with his white robes, long white hair, he recognized in him a person that he had seen in his dreams, telling him, go conquer the kingdom of Persians. And so instead of destroying Jerusalem, he stopped and he knelt in front of him and kissed the hand of the priest. Parmenion, his general, says, what are you doing? You're the king. He says, I didn't do that for this person, but for what he represents. And there is more folklore about the visit of Alexander in Jerusalem. He visited the temple and he asked for a statue in the temple. And the high priest politely said, you know, we don't have statues in our temple, but I could promise you that we're going to name firstborn kids, boys of this year, Alexander. And since then, Alexander is also a Jewish name. And then there is more. If you look at the book of Daniel, which was written during the Babylonian exile, which means 2 centuries before Alexander, there is a quote that here comes the Prince of Greece, and the Jews use that in a sense to help the PR and the propaganda of Alexander going towards Persia. So the first diaspora is not after the destruction of the temple. It's during and immediately after the time of Alexander. And you can see that the first communities in various cities of Greece were established between the 4th and the 4th century before and the 2nd century after Christ. And this is the beginning of the Hellenistic period. The Hellenistic period is the period immediately after the death of Alexander. The Jews came under the rule of the Ptolemies in Egypt and the Seleucids in Syria. They lost the language. They used Greek as their language. They assumed Greek customs and manners. They preserved, however, their faith and dietary rules. And we have many information about this period. This mosaic is from a synagogue in what is now Jordan, and you can see in the top Iagia Polis Jerusalem, the holy city Jerusalem, and everything in this mosaic is coding Jewish names. And if you can see on the slide on the right-hand side, Jews, those are frescoes found in some homes in Israel, and you can see how the prude shepherds of Judea became Hellenized. They wear Greek clothes, they participate in sports, and they changed their habits almost 100% towards the Greek way of living. It is incredible the amount of information that exists, and so very few people know about the connections between Hellenism and Judaism. And this connection is extremely important. And if you think it very carefully, it represents the basis of the Western civilization and what we still call Judeo-Christian civilization. And then came Alexandria, and Alexandria was a bustling city, was the largest city of the Mediterranean at the time, very powerful. Greeks and Jews and Egyptians lived together. There was a very prosperous Greek-speaking community at the time. The Bible was translated by the 70 sages, and that's why it is called the translation of the Septuagint. And the Bible was translated into Greek, the Old Testament. And it is through this translation that the Jews were able to maintain their religious roots, because, as I said earlier, they had lost their Jewish language. And it is through the same translation that Paul and the early Christians drew some of their knowledge from this translation and expanded it in Christianity. And just for a minute, I have this chart there, and in line 4 from the bottom, you have the Hebrew alphabet. And then, of course, 2 from the bottom is the Greek alphabet. And if you just listen for a minute, you say Alpha, and in Hebrew is Aleph, and Vita, and it's Bet, and Gamma, it's Gimel, and Lamed, it's Lambda, and you know that there is a tremendous connection, and the base and the roots were the same. Unfortunately, the same time, in Alexandria, the seed of, we shouldn't say anti-Semitism because the term was coined only 150 years ago in Germany, but Judeophobia started, and this was due to many reasons. Greeks couldn't appreciate people coming in and saying, only our God is worth it. Your gods are nothing. They didn't understand the dietetic rules. They strongly objected circumcision. Greeks loved the human body and the perfection of the human body, and they would object to, as they viewed it, mutilation. And certainly there were economic factors. There were very prominent scholars, Jewish scholars in Alexandria, and it's interesting because we say Jewish scholars, but for instance, Philo Judaeus of Alexandria, which he was the most eminent philosopher of this era, but he grew up and he knew all the Greek literature, Platonic, Stoic, and plus the Jewish ideas. So he was able to put these ideas together, and in a sense, he laid the foundation for the Jewish, Christian, and Muslim rational theology. The Logos, or the Word of God, mediates that God's absoluteness to creation, articulating divine wisdom in nature and in human intelligence. And then there was Flavius Josephus, as I mentioned earlier. He was a very prominent, he was a Roman citizen, he was Jewish, and he spoke Greek and he wrote in Greek. And he wrote 2 wonderful texts. The first one is about the antiquities of the Jews, where, and he explains that he undertook this work so that he explains to the Greeks who the Jews were, what are their beliefs, and on and on and on. And it is said that he was present during the destruction of Jerusalem by Titus, and he wrote the War of the Jews, or the destruction of Jerusalem as well. And that was the year 70, and this is the time of Titus destroying Jerusalem, and this was actual time of the real diaspora. But again, take a look what happens in the Mediterranean in the 1st century, and now this is the Roman Empire, and it is estimated that at this particular time, 1/10 of the population of the Roman Empire were of Jewish faith. And you can see all these Jewish communities in what is now Greece. And Apostle Paul, during his journeys, and there were 3 in Greece, he stopped and he preached in the synagogues 3 times in Salonika, but also in Veria, in Athens, and in Corinth. And we still have ruins of these synagogues. This is the synagogue in Delos, the sacred island, and the archaeologists named this seat the throne of Moses. And this still exists. So if you plan to go to Mykonos and party, go across to Delos and you can see the synagogue. And there is a synagogue in Athens, right in the Agora, right in the foothill of the Acropolis. And there are remnants in Corinth and this mosaic in Aegina from the 5th century. Then came Byzantium, and this was the continuation of the Roman Empire, but also the capital moved to Constantinople. This is a picture of Constantine the Great, the founder of the Byzantine Empire. He is the one who established Christianity as the official religion of the empire. During the Byzantine years, the Jews didn't fare well sometimes. There were some emperors that were very heavy-handed. There were others that forgot what the previous emperor said. There were changes, but there were never the type of pogroms, auto-da-fés, or other problems that the Jews encountered in Western Europe. During the early period, we don't have too much information in writing except of some little ruins, probably funeral stones, and you can see everywhere the lamp in all these remnants from various places in Greece. There are some books discussing in detail the story of the Jews during the Byzantine Empire, but again, the written information is very little, and we know, however, that during the year 1000, in all these cities, as you can see there, even in smaller cities as Drama or Mistras, there were prominent Jewish communities. And I don't know if you can read down there, but in the last line, the name is, above that it says Psychis, which is the south, and then in the bottom it says Yaakov. That's again another funeral stone. And then in the late period of Byzantium is more interesting. We have much more information. This man, Benjamin de Tudela, was from Spain, and he visited Jewish communities not only in Greece and the Byzantine Empire, but also in Western Europe and Asia Minor. And when, among other things, among other places, he visited the Jews in Constantinople. And he writes that he describes the status of the Jews in his detailed book within the Christian society, their professions, their wealth, despite their oppressions. And yet the Jews are rich and good and charitable and bear their lot with cheerfulness. And that's 1,000 years ago. Then in the Byzantium folded in 1453, and Constantinople was